Hey everyone, welcome to Dev Interrupted. I'm your host, Dan Lyons, LinearB COO, and today I'm joined by Louis Brandy, VP of Engineering at Rockset. Welcome to Dev Interrupted, Louis.
Thank you for having me. It's super exciting to be here.
Yeah, really, I think we're going to have a great conversation today. I love the topics that we have in place. We have like AI hype cycle, things around AI, a little bit about your background and that type of stuff. What I see here is you joined Rockset. You spent more than 10 years at Meta. So before coming to Rockset, you were at 10 years at Meta. And one of the things that you were working on and built, and I think even leading an engineering team, was around Meta's AI initiatives. Could you tell us a little bit about your background in Meta and then getting to Rockset?
Yeah, so I want to be careful here because AI initiative at Meta is a very loaded term. But I was doing AI and ML stuff early on, and like before it was cool. So we're gonna talk about hype cycles. So this is kind of cool because this is in the before time. So specifically for people who know a lot about like how AI has developed in the last 10 years, this is like the pre-deep learning time. There's still a lot of that stuff. Like there's still a lot of like classic machine learning, and there's still a lot of use cases for that kind of stuff. But I actually worked at mostly on this stuff, doing a lot of like I don't want to call it proto AI. I mean, it was still AI, but it was different than it is now. And we built a lot of really important systems. I mostly worked in the spam fighting and image classification kind of world. So this is actually quite relevant to what's happening right now, like right as we speak. But this was before everything broke loose, so to speak. So this is before like Facebook had what is known as FAIR and a lot of the other like extensive and major investments into AI. But yes, I was building all of that for a long time. We built a lot of cool systems in that era, many of which got replaced later by much bigger, more sophisticated AI as that research kept going.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, tell us about the different stages, right? Because you were there kind of like, I don't know, you said like pre-stage a little bit early on, then something shifted, and now you see AI everywhere and everyone's talking about it. Can you tell us the difference between these two stages that we're in?
So like my history, I even got back before Facebook. I worked in face recognition and face detection, but I've always been on the implementer infra side more so than the research. So like my thing was always like how fast, how many frames a second can we make this thing run? How many dollars or watts does it need to run? Like that's kind of always been my home turf, like the infra side of it. And
Yep.
but what's interesting in like how it's developed was like I kind of watched it all happen. Like we were doing like a lot of the stuff that we were doing kind of, in that first few years at Facebook, as well as before that, all that stuff sort of vanished in favor of this deep learning type of stuff, where the idea was like you have these things that just scale really far with the amount of data. And a lot of the research before that, as I understand it, was like of the form you built better models to make use of the data you had. It turns out that's actually the wrong approach, or in some sense, there's so many situations where that's the right approach, but there's at least this one category of model that it's actually just more and more data. Like how far can this model a huge enough data set, and then can you shove enough data at it? And that's roughly what happened. And then so these really, big places were able to do lots of training on lots of data, and they started to build things that were far more powerful than a really sophisticated model that was trained on less data could ever hope to accomplish.
And that's really cool. I mean, I think that's what you're saying, where we're seeing it in like consumer application, ChatGPT. Everyone and their mother knows about AI now in some way, whether it's like a buzzword or maybe it's not a buzzword, but everyone is experiencing it. And I think that's kind of what you're saying. I mean, that was kind of like the big change with the big data sets and Google and all of that. What is your stance on the current AI hype cycle? Is it really hype? Is it not hype? Here to stay? Like, what's your viewpoint?
So we did a conference not very long ago, and one of the questions I got asked was, is it all hype? And I love that question because it's easy. Like the answer is it's definitely not all hype. And I was really thankful they used the word all, because you asked the harder question, right? Which is like, what do you think about it? I think that there are always going to be hype cycles. We're always going to find ourselves attracted to some shiny thing at any given moment. Some of them are much more real than others. My big hot take on AI is that like it's going to get radically better at things you don't expect. 2 years from now, it's going to be shockingly good at something you did not expect it to be that good at that quickly. But there will probably also always be ways that it's bad in ways that are surprising. Like you'll look at it be amazing at this thing you thought it would do, but it's going to fail in some interesting way that's maybe unexpected. So it's always going to be this like lopsided creature that's getting better in various ways. I absolutely don't think it's all hype. I absolutely think there's an insane amount of hype too, and there's a lot of froth that you're going to have to like sort through and figure out what's real and what sticks. So in my current role, we're building infra for AI. So in some sense, I have a good horizontal view of all the different kinds of things people are trying. But even from where I sit, it's hard to tell what's real. You know, in other words, someone's spending a lot of money to build a thing. I don't know if they're making money yet. Like it's hard to, that's going to take years to kind of figure out if
monetize.
Yeah. Like, so how much of this is just like fueled speculation versus like a real value, so to speak? But then again, on the flip side, like I also get to see lots of really clever things that people are doing that like at least on the surface, like seem promising. And in some ways that's seductive, like it's dangerous. Like the fact that it seems promising, but maybe it isn't, is like sort of the way that's a good way to lose like a lot of time and money to chase something. But so no, what's my current take on it? I think it's going to change a lot. I think it's going to also, there's going to be false promises along the way. There's going to be things we think it can do that it won't. And that it's going to, this is like a classic moment of disruption where we're going to have to figure this out and we have to be careful to some degree.
Yeah, I really love how you summed it up. The thing that you said that I like most is, well, a few things actually. One thing is AI is maybe right now good at certain things that are a little unexpected or could be unexpected. And other things that you may think AI like should just be able to do, and it's like not so good at it.
Yep.
And with your background, you're kind of sitting, I think, at the infrastructure type area. So you get to see all of these like trials and errors. There's a lot of money going into it. I don't know if it's like the .com boost because I didn't run a company in that like era, but maybe it kind of feels that way in the same thing of like, okay, let's try AI for everything and see what sticks. Let's put a bunch of money into it. The ones that are hit are going to be like gajillion-dollar companies, and the ones that don't, it's like, whatever, I'm going to invest in like 20 of these and one of them will hit. But what I would ask you then is where do you think AI is doing well, like useful right now? And do you also have an example on the other side of like something that you think like, oh, it should be good at, but it's actually like stinks at this and it's not gonna do anything?
I mean, we could do it in reverse. I mean, sorry, answering in the reverse order, because I actually think this is like, we could like have a whole philosophical discussion here because like every single AI breakthrough that's ever happened, it's really trivial for a human to sit down and be like, look at this absolutely ridiculous thing that it's failing at. Like you can do that with ChatGPT right now. You can go in there, and I actually did this recently where I was like, hey, give me the 3 biggest, most expensive software bugs in history. And it lists all 3 of them, like the 3 most expensive. And I was like, put them in order. And it didn't put them in order. Like it had the right numbers. It just couldn't order them. And it's like, this is a really trivial mistake to make. I think it'll always be like that. It'll always be like that. Like it's making a mistake in some surprisingly trivial way because it doesn't think like we do. So something that's trivial to me and you is not going to be trivial to it. And like I have a feeling that's gonna like this. There'll be a superhuman intelligence that can solve all our problems, and we'll still be sitting around going, but look how dumb it is at this thing, right?
Yeah, something that is like so easy for all of us,
right?
And you would say, oh, this like advanced intelligence like AI, that should be nothing for it.
Yeah.
And it's tripping up.
Exactly. And like what I think that means practically is that you can't really take its expertise for granted. Like you could imagine a world in which a self-driving car is like provably better than humans, or a doctor is provably better at diagnosis than a doctor. However, it will make mistakes that any human will be like, no, whoa, that's crazy. And so I guess the idea that like in some sense the combo maybe will always, at least for the foreseeable future, is going to be very, very powerful.
Yeah.
But I think that's going to happen everywhere. And so in some sense, it's like horizontal. In other words, in every question, the AI is going to get really good, but also be really bad in some other way. So it's not like it's going to be good at these jobs and terrible at these jobs. It's like it's going to be really good at significant aspects of everything and really bad at significant aspects of everything. And it's actually hard to predict ahead of time how that's going to feel as things go.
So you're describing it more, you said horizontal, right?
Yeah.
And when you said that, what I started to think about it, like when I think about horizontal, does it mean kind of AI could be now useful for maybe every profession in some way, but not necessarily, but still make like the dumb mistakes also in every profession. So, for example, I mean, the obvious things I think that AI is good at is you could say something like, write me an opening like speech or something, or like do a template, or like write my book report, like all that kind of stuff. Yeah, it can collect all information, do really well. But do you see it the same way that I'm seeing it, in that sense of like horizontal could kind of help everybody, but kind of miss also for everybody?
I think the most likely medium term, if it's going to end up being majorly disruptive, I think the most likely medium term version is like it disrupts a significant fraction of most of our jobs, as opposed to it is the one reason
Takes
why
over
this is
the whole job. Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why this is different, maybe in a material sense, from like previous like automation kind of disruptions, whereas hey, we built, I mean, we'll use a classic example, like, hey, we built mechanical looms. The weaver profession is in big trouble. This is a little different than that, because it's like in the sense of there's the disruption to everyone is actually hard to predict exactly how much of your job can become automated, and like certain parts of your job can just become a lot easier, and that gives you more time to do the other parts of your job. So exactly how that impacts things, it's super hard to predict. But just to be clear, like I think all this is still a little bit, this is like medium term. I don't think in the short term we're in super grave danger of a lot of any of these like major disruptions. But I think it's worth thinking about, so that depending on where you're at in this equation, at least thinking about like if it comes to be, right? Maybe it won't, maybe it will. But if it does come to be, to at least to put some intellectual effort into figuring out like how that's going to impact the different parts of our jobs.
Yeah. Well, let's say, I mean, it's a great intro and an opening. Let's turn it into, I mean, you're an engineering leader, right? You're a VP of engineering. That's been I think your trade throughout your career. That's what you've kind of like studied, specialized in, that type of thing. But also you have a lot of background on infrastructure, like you said, for AI, and is even like when you were in the meta days, like you said, hey, it's like wasn't AI, it was like the precursor. But, how should we think about this as engineering leaders, for those listening on this pod, where it's like it's almost like there's a pressure of like, hey, how are you using AI? What are you doing with it?
Yeah.
How should we think about it as engineering leaders?
I love this question. I have a question first you have to answer before I have an opinion, which is where are you in this space, right? So there's like, I think there's like a decision node right at the start, which is either I am in AI, like I'm betting some significant fraction of my business on this idea. And how did I get here? Like, should I even do that? Then there's like, you're not there. You're on the outside. As you said, there might be like a pressure, like a thing has just happened. Like I'm an insurance company. AI has just happened. Does that matter to me? Like, am I missing something? Am I about to get sideswiped in a way I don't appreciate or understand? Like what's just happened? And I think these two situations are different, but there are some things I would say is the same. So it's funny because this whole intro, I gave you the pro, like, hey, I think there's something very real about this hype cycle that you should think about. Then there's like the exact opposite. So like if you ask me, the VP of engineering, I actually have a completely different opinion, which is like, I have we have a whole bunch of software engineers. I can assure you that if we said, hey, AI is super cool, go work on that, they would all like run full speed to go work on that. Like that's fun.
That's fun.
It's exciting.
I mean, I'm an engineer. I want to do fun shit.
Yeah,
like,
exactly. So like,
and in that situation, honestly, the fun part, like I don't care, honestly, if it works out well or not. It's like, I just want to be involved.
Exactly. Like, so I have this, like, this is a much more boring podcast, but like in management 101, one of the things I always say is like, there's like any project you have like lives in this two-dimensional space. Like one dimension is how shiny it is, and one dimension is like how impactful it is. And so like the truth is shiny and impactful things are almost always never real. Like those are, because if there was something that was truly shiny and impactful, we would have done it last half. Like we wouldn't have waited till now to do it. It's already done, in other words. Now it's not always true, of course, but typically that's true. So that means that any given, and by the way, if something is not shiny and not impactful, we're definitely not going to work on it. Like if nobody wants to do it and it has no impact, like that's not going to exist. So everything kind of exists on this like horizontal front. And so like as an average rule, this is an average, the less shiny it is, the more impactful it is. That is the mathematical thing I just worked out. So like as a manager, you should be deeply distrustful of shiny things. Like, oh, no, shiny's scary, because like you don't need me to pump us full of like enthusiasm for shiny. Like that's not like, right? Like that's not what, that's the easy part, right? The hard part is to say like, no, actually like the unit tests are actually, that's the thing we should care about right now, not like not go solve all the AI problems in the world.
Let's get our test coverage in order so we can move fast.
Right. And so this is like the counterpoint from before, which is like when you're in these kind of like frothy moments, you don't want to miss it, but you also don't want to get sucked away by it. Like you don't want to like lose a half a team for half a year in the froth, right, of the cycle.
Okay, so I think that gives us kind of maybe like a mental model of how to think about it. Mm-hmm. And then for you, I'll put you on the spot. For you personally, as an engineering leader, so you gave us a good mental model. Are there aspects with AI, or maybe it's not even fully AI, but like things like Copilot, like are there things that you're saying, you know what, I will spend effort to look in and experiment, or no, I'm not going to do it?
I think step one is you have to make a value judgment on this cycle. You have to predict the future. Like we can choose if you'd like a previous hype cycle, which was blockchain. I think that was the most hypey thing.
Oh,
before.
I remember that one.
Yeah, before AI. It may still be a thing. It's good to have two in your brain, because even if you're very pro AI, it's fairly easy to be skeptical of blockchain, or maybe vice versa, depending on your environment.
What's the one before that?
I don't know. I'm old enough to remember like Web 2.0 and
like the internet, like the first one.
Yeah, like the internet. There's probably if we put some time in, we could probably think of some
like the computer, the personal, the PC. Cycles. The PC.
I mean, I guess before that was mobile.
No one will ever use a PC. That's a business machine.
Mobile was the hype cycle before that. Everything had to be mobile, right? Like everything had to move onto the phones. Apps. Was maybe the hype cycle before that. You have to kind of make a value judgment. And for example, AI, I think it's very easy for me in my position to not be hyped up about blockchain. Like I build a database. That's my day job. So like blockchain is not something that's going to be super impactful for me. I can make that call ahead of time. AI is quite different though, because it actually has two aspects that are interesting, because one isn't just my product. Like, can my product be made better? But also my developers, right? Like, so you mentioned Copilot. Yeah. So that's like a whole extra layer to this. So like my rule, like there's two ways to think about this. And this is the way I always do this. One is outside in, like market in, like what does the market want from this product? And is there a way that AI can help? And then one is like bottoms up, right? And this is like, can we come up with cool ideas for the product using AI, or can we use it internally to make ourselves more productive? And we actually, for the second one, we did both of these things. And we did it in a fairly straightforward way, which was like time boxed sort of hack style things. Like we did a week and we said, everyone go nuts. We didn't actually limit it to AI. We didn't say, hey, do an AI hack for whatever. We just said, do it. But AI was super frothy, so it was like everyone go experiment and play with this. You can work whatever you want, but we did basically like a 1 week go nuts, and demo days on Friday. So build something this week that you can show off by Friday. And what's cool about something like that is even if nothing comes to be. By the way, sometimes it does. Like there are very famous stories of stuff like that turning into entire billion-dollar ideas.
Yeah, like hackathon into billion-dollar idea. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But even if it doesn't, something very important happens, which is like you no longer are operating at this first level of AI understanding. You're like 2 or 3 levels deep. Like you'll see a demo and you'll say something like, man, that isn't going to work. But if it was better at A, B, and C, this suddenly gets interesting. And now you have a new understanding, and now you can pay attention to A, B, and C, and like pay a lot more attention. And you've also, by the way, the manager brain, you've time boxed this. Like I'm not like, I dedicated a week or a month or whatever, right? But I'm not gonna just like flush huge amounts of time.
Yeah, you've capped your initial investment.
Exactly.
So did you do it for like a week?
We did. So this is part of we do this anyway. We do this periodically. We just have a week and we just do this. Yeah. This is like already a thing we've built into the way we work at Rockset. Lots of good things have come out of this. So again, we're building infra. So for us, it's a little bit easier when you're sort of building shovels rather than like digging for gold. And like a lot of our existing infrastructure did come from from early prototypes in this space. So for example, the first version of vector search within Rockset was built during that week, and it was cool. Vector search is its own super exciting shiny problem. People love that problem, and so it was pretty easy to get people to go like implement cool vector search and like get it working properly on our infrastructure. And then all of a sudden, it's like, well, this actually fits. This is actually a really good, And so that eventually became a full work stream, and it was originally birthed in one of these hack weeks.
I mean, even one takeaway is like Hack Week can produce something of value that's for sure you can, so and then cap your investment, learn. I liked what you said, like, okay, now you're a few levels deeper, and maybe you can have like a more educated opinion of how much more or not to invest. Like that, I think is a good takeaway.
There's a lot of reasons to do this kind of a Hack Week thing. Like, it's just fun for morale, like as a team building thing. It's fun. It's just fun in general. But this one ulterior motive, I think, is actually really valuable, which is like, it's a really great way. It's a really effective way to kind of do a bunch of things, fail very safely, and learn a lot from failure, so to speak, in a way that is like, feels awesome. It's a totally different thing to like set up a project and 3 months in, kill it because it's not going well. That doesn't feel good. But having a hack week where you just build something crazy and you're like, oh, this is terrible, and like, and then you erase it at the end, like, it feels great, and you learn a lot about the limitations. And so this is something I've always kind of, for AI in particular, I was actually quite interested in like, if I take our docs and I throw it into an LLM, like how good is that robot at answering questions about our docs? It's going back to the very beginning, it's shockingly good, but also weirdly bad in certain ways. But it's really visceral to experience that directly in a quick way.
Are you using AI in any of your software development practices that are like baked in, like into your workflows are you invested in it?
We turned on Copilot, like in Copilot-like things. We have people who are using it and trying it. As of this moment right now, I cannot say that it has been wildly successful.
Okay, interesting.
You have to define wild success. I mean, I don't, but I don't think I would, at the current moment, I don't think I would call it necessary. Like, I wouldn't say you need to go do this right now or you're behind. However, I don't know how much longer that might be true. Like, I think today it's not necessarily earth-shattering. You have to go do it right now. It's unclear to me how much longer that can be true, especially as we get into like these AI systems that start to use tools. Like in other words, they can write tests and run the tests. And like this, you get into this, like, I don't know how deep we want to get to, but you get into these kind of like tool using agent type AI workflows. All of a sudden, it may not be insane to like have it say, write a test suite for something. Again, I don't really know. I would say as of today, we do not use, at least not like as a first class citizen in our development environment today. No.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's awesome. Like, thank you for sharing. Cause I think when I was saying like the pressure, I was saying, some of the engineering leaders I speak with, there's almost like, hey, what are you doing with AI? What are you doing with Copilot? Is it everywhere? And a lot of what at LinearB for our customers, we measure the impact. Did Copilot actually improve the developer experience like you thought it might, or did it not, or is it like somewhere, in the middle? This stuff isn't free, so it costs money, right? So it's like, is your investment worth it? So we're doing a lot. Like, there's a lot of companies there, I would say, experimenting with the use of it and want to know the impact. And then the other thing that you said that is interesting is you do see some of this, like, you said it with tooling, right? I think that's the terminology you use, like different tooling, like, okay, maybe like a PR, pull request review type AI, or like I can analyze the code and say, like, here's like the summary of what this is, or the description, or what you should look out for. And I wouldn't say, and I think that is actually interesting. There are some companies using that. And the other thing I would say is, like, I don't even know if I would call it AI, but bots. Let's say bots.
Yeah.
And the way that I define at least a bot in like the SDLC, like the workflow, is I see a lot of companies where 50% of the PRs are not made by humans, or like 25% or 70%, like it ranges. And when you start getting into that situation, then I've seen the situation where it's like the PR was not created by a human, and the first review was not done by a human. Okay, now we're into this, like, that's interesting. How do we orchestrate this together? So let's go to your point. All of these, and tests are maybe lower impact, but the tests were not created by a human. And then, like, the review of the test was not created by a human. What do you do to orchestrate that? And I see that the industry experimenting with that, let's say.
I mean, so it's hard to have this conversation without things rapidly getting philosophical. But like, there is a spectrum, right? Like, I mean, at some point, like, having a linter that complains about your code having clear bugs in it is like a proto form of AI. Like, it's not a huge jump, right? Like, and like, we use a lot of that stuff, right? Like, I've used Clang Tidy and stuff for years, right, to like clean up code. And to be clear, when you work at the giant places like Facebook, like, there's robots everywhere. They're making changes. They're commenting on change sets. They get in fights sometimes. Like, one will yell at the other one for doing something, and then the first one will, there's all kinds of entertainment with the robots, trying to make code changes. I'm actually kind of curious. Then I guess I have a question for you. We can turn this around. Like, have you seen horizontal evidence that Copilot is beyond the experimentation phase? Because I mean, we're experimenting as well, but have you seen people using it extensively for like major impact?
I have seen larger companies rolling this out to 70% plus of the developers. Coming from more of a top down, like CTO, VP saying, hey, we are going to at least ensure that we could be ahead of the game in this area.
Sure.
But also with that same type of person coming with, I am not saying that this is going to revolutionize. I would like to measure and then report back to the business if that is a path forward for us. That's the state that I see it. So I see, to summarize, so most companies are experimenting and want to know the impact. That's where we're helping with LinearB. That's what I see. That's my
I mean, that's almost exactly what I would say as well.
Now, the impact of that, I think, ranges per, there's a variance, let's call it. Like, what type of developer are you? What are you doing? What app are you building? Are you front end, back end? Are you? And so I think that data is starting to come to light. And then I would say on the other side of it, besides Copilot, so I'm like helping you create code, I have seen, and that's why I said it really explicitly, like, I said non-humans. I didn't say necessarily AI is creating but I see a lot of non-human generated code that is actually hurting how fast code gets released because it's getting stuck in the review process. And humans don't want to review all of this non-human code that is rapidly being generated. Let's put it that way.
Okay. All right. Squares with my experience.
Yeah. So I I'm in the position. I think it's a very interesting time. Very interesting. I could see a world where it's like rapidly exploding, but I do think people are cautious. They want to measure. So, what is your? So I know you're more. We could probably do like a 2-hour podcast on this. I know you said you're more on like the infrastructure side with AI. Maybe tell us a few like a little more of a background about that, but also if you have a comment on how, like, you said a little bit about it, but like AI enablement in the product. Like, let's talk about products for a second.
Yeah. So, like at a really high level, there's this giant neural network somewhere, and it effectively is like the sequence of vectors, right? It is able to it iterates vectors right through the layers of this network, and this is interesting because one of the things that can happen, and this is how some of this works, is you get this like vector idea, right? Which is like I can turn a prompt into a vector, and then I can do vector lookups, vector search, to find, essentially retrieve other data, and you get this idea of retrieval augmented generation, right? So I can fetch data doing this vector search that is relevant to the question that's been asked, this AI, and then I can provide the AI with that data to form a better answer. This is retrieval augmented generation, RAG. It's its own hype cycle, sub-hype cycle, and the larger hype cycle is RAG. And from an infra perspective, this is a super interesting problem because vector search it's actually a very hard algorithmic problem, but it's very easy relative to the neural network stuff, especially computationally. And so it's the only part that you really have to mega scale. And so you end up with an architecture that, again, it's hard to predict. This is super fast moving, but you end up with an architecture where like the neural network is the brain to some first approximation, and the retrieval is the memory, so to speak, in this, the CPU in memory, if you prefer that analogy. And they have very different properties that are very powerful. And like one of the powers of the memory of this system is that you can insert data into it and remove data from it in a way that's easy and quick. You can't retrain an LLM at the same speed. You can add and remove data from the database, so to speak.
Oh, interesting.
And so teaching an LLM how to use a database, or Google, like literally teaching it how to use Google to give you better answers, is very rapidly emerging as a very powerful enabler of a lot of these systems. And that brings one other piece of radically important infra requirement into the situation, which is what is the data latency requirements of this data? So in other words, if you ask, we'll use ChatGPT as an example. If I ask ChatGPT about the top 100 songs in 1957, it doesn't need to know. But if I ask it the score of the baseball game right now, the neural network doesn't know a single thing about the baseball game right now. In order to answer that question, it has to go fetch something live, some kind of live piece of data. So this real-time component is actually really interesting because it's really important for some questions, and it's also impossible for the heavy neural network to handle. And so this is where you get into this very interesting balance between like the heavy intelligence versus the rapid lookups, and then teaching the heavy intelligence to use the lookups effectively, which is this RAG style thing. And this is like this emerging architectural space where Rockset, we are heavily focused on this real-time component of things. So if you want,
like what happened, like you're saying, did someone just get an RBI in baseball right now?
Yeah.
That's like more real. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, a better example would be like for like real-time recommendations, for example. We have a customer it's called Whatnot. They do live buying and selling. It's like Twitch streams, but for auctions. So you can literally go find someone that's selling Marvel comic books right now and interact with that human live. That's a classic recommendation problem. Like Amazon does this. You go to Amazon, you say products like this one, and they'll show you other products. Yeah. But one of the reasons their problem is interesting is it's because it has this live component. Twitch has the same problem, by the way, which is like, I can only recommend you channels that are live now. Otherwise, it's like a pointless feature.
Yeah, and otherwise I missed the opportunity.
Right, so the liveness piece of data is utterly real time, is super real time. And you have to incorporate that into your AI recommendation frameworks. And so this is the kind of thing that Rockset is designed to do.
Yeah, okay, that's interesting. And maybe dumb question, but I was thinking about it while you're talking. Like, when you say real time, what
Yes.
is the is it like minute, like
Yeah.
something happened in minutes? Is it all the way extended to an hour, or is it like seconds?
I don't know. So it's a perfect question. It's not a dumb question at all. It's actually the smartest question because the word real time is one of those super overloaded terms.
Yeah.
So depending on who you talk to, it can mean any of those things. For us, it typically means on the order of minutes to seconds.
Minutes to seconds.
Yeah,
Okay.
like for a large scale data retrieval system, that's super fast. But obviously, if I was building like a kernel to fly in a plane, you would want microsecond,
Yep.
latencies, not minutes. But yeah, so in our case, what we're talking about typically is in the minutes to seconds range.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm thinking like then okay, like product usage, or even like even before we would go to like product usage, just like my very broadly, like my engineering infrastructure. Like I'm the VP of engineering. I need to make decisions on my infrastructure.
Mhm.
I need to understand what my product does. If I understand enough what my product does, then like when would I make a decision to use like
Yeah.
this type of stuff versus, oh, actually I don't need like that style real time. That's where my head
Yep.
was going.
Yep. I mean, there is a fundamental trade-off between like how cold the data can be and how much it costs, like to keep it warm, basically.
Right.
So if you're good with yesterday's data, and by the way, a lot of the world is fine
Yeah.
with yesterday's data.
Yeah,
You
it's
can
like
do it
24
very
hours is not real time. In this
Yeah.
case, it's like yesterday's day is fine.
Yeah. But it's also far less expensive to like in a very fundamental way. But like even going back to AI, so we sort of like again there's this gamut of what word even means. Like recommendations is like a classic ML problem. But even something simple like you want a chatbot, like imagine you're an airline and you want a chatbot, like, hey, what's the status of my flight? And it just gives you the answer as a chatbot. That's a perfect example of a thing you cannot build without a real-time, to some degree, real-time data system behind the LLM that says,
Yeah.
hey, LLM, this is the status of that flight. Give them some text to generate some text to answer that question.
Yep. Yeah, makes sense. You would consider that AI? Like if I'm getting an answer like that, is that AI?
Well,
AI now it's like this buzzword. Now AI to me, it's only AI if I'm impressed. Like
that's a good
consumer,
definition.
It's like if it like impressed me and I was like shocked that it did a good job, like that's AI. If it's not, then it's like that's that old thing that we used to do.
I think that people underestimate. I think most people, will use the term chatbot, but I actually think that denigrates the value of a human interface, a human language interface to a thing. Because like I would love to be able to like, I do this all the time already, like, hey Siri, and ask Siri a question and like get an answer. If you can make that materially better, like, hey Siri, what's the status of my flight? Siri's talking to me. Okay, I gotta stop that. But like it would be really cool to like get answers to that you could trust. And so I do think that like even though it's just an LLM spitting, like I could have just as easily Googled the status of my flight, of course. But I do think there's a lot of places where having the LLM generate a human, like taking in human questions and giving human answers is actually a superior API to a particular question.
Yeah, makes sense. I think we talked, okay, you're like the VP of engineering. We talked a little bit like, okay, think about it as product too. What about for the individual engineer or the individual developer? And maybe I'm thinking about my career, or maybe I'm thinking about my productivity. Am I good enough? Like, do you have any advice if I'm a IC?
So there's two things I think about here. One general piece of advice I always give people is like the best way to be successful in your career is to align your strengths and passions with the thing the business cares about. So, like you could love being a kernel hacker, but if you work at like a web dev shop, they're not going to value your interests. So like step one is like aligning the things and I said something that I skipped past that I shouldn't, which is your strengths. A lot of people focus like on their weaknesses, and I actually think that's actually a mistake. Like when you're fairly junior in your career, it's good to know like what you're not so good at. But as you get more senior, it's really about what you are good at and like trying to make that your entire day and trying to align that with the business. And so we talk about something like AI. It's exactly the same kind of idea where it's like, you may be super excited to buy AI, but if that really at the end of the day doesn't align with the business, like you're going to be the one pulling on the shiny, and the manager somewhere is going to be the one that's like, no, don't come back from the shiny. On the flip side, if you find a place where that stuff does align, where there is a product that works in this space, where this stuff actually moves needles that matter, and you're super passionate about it and you're good at it, like that is where, like, you get all that stuff aligned, then everything goes wild. So like, to some degree, like when I think about this kind of stuff, like I do think as a software engineer, you're always going to want to be messing with the new stuff. Like always, you're always going to want to mess with it because that's just part of what you do. Like that's part of what got you here. And that's probably, it'll always be part of your wiring. So kind of developing that internal governor of like, I've messed with this enough. This is probably not the right thing to be doing at the moment. Or saying like, no, this matters a lot. I'm going to go bet on this. And then finding a place where that aligns with the business, right? Like you got to make a judgment on which way the wind is blowing. Is it good or bad? And then you want to like get into a place where that matters. And I think that's like the general feel of this. And as a general rule, again, same thing as before, like it's also really great to know something and kind of know its limits and say like, no, we shouldn't do that. Like sometimes you get to be the grown up in the room and be like, guys, this is too shiny. We shouldn't go down this road.
Yeah. And I think like I'll just add in the only way, or most of the time, if you're like how you be the grown up in the room and say like this is too shiny is to investigate it and like know to say that. That's the key. Yes.
Yeah, like just to be clear, we use the word like engineering leader a lot, but like I'd rather not be the manager that's doing that. Almost always it's much worse for it to be me than someone else. Like I'd much rather the tech lead or somebody stand up and say, that path leads to madness, right? Like it's cool.
Like, hey, I dove into this for, you know, on the weekend or a week or whatever. And like, here's my blunt opinion.
Yep. And like, and if you want to prove me wrong, this is the next level, the second or tertiary level of things that I think are bad, that are going to be a problem. Like if you want to prove me wrong, that's go attack those problems and come back, right? Like, and that's again, where that investigation is really valuable.
All right. Well, some great advice. And I think we have enough like follow-up topics that we could do another fun pod, but we will wrap it up for today. So Louis, thank you so much for joining me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great.
And for you listeners, make sure you've subscribed to our Dev Interrupted YouTube channel to watch this episode and tons of behind-the-scenes content. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And again, Louis, was awesome to have you on, man.
Thank you for having me.